Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can get more information about this show and other shows at our website, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica May, Vice President of Philanthropy and Marketing at Verner Center for Early Learning. And Jessica, what you can do, you can wave to all your friends who are watching this. Okay, that is Jessica. Jessica is originally from the upstate of South Carolina, and she's thrilled to be with the Verner Center for Early Learning. She and her husband, David, relocated to West North Carolina 6 years ago, immediately falling in love with the area, the people, and the culture. Previous to the appointment, Jessica served as Director of Development at the Asheville Symphony Orchestra, and prior to that, she was with Western Carolina Rescue Ministries. And so the question I always ask, Jessica, the first time I have somebody on board, is as a child, you grew up where?
I'm sorry, as a child, I grew up where?
Yeah, where'd you grow
I
up?
grew up in Greer, South Carolina. And
Oh,
back in the day, no one knew where that was. But now that we
right.
have BMW and an airport, people know where Greer is.
That's funny, yeah, because I pass, I always see Greer, South Carolina. But let me ask you too, then, as a young woman or as a girl growing up in South Carolina, did you always know you wanted to be a director of philanthropy for a nonprofit?
Absolutely not. It was not on my radar at all. I actually went to school in undergrad to be I went for voice performance, so a classical opera singer, if you will. And then as I got ready to wrap up my undergrad and enter into my graduate work, I had done a good bit of traveling and singing, and just it wasn't for me. I just knew I did not want to live out of a suitcase. It wasn't the lifestyle I wanted. So I quickly pivoted and ended up landing a job as a long-term sub in a choral high school position, went back, got my master's in music ed and taught elementary music for about 6 years. And then by a long story made very, very short, the executive director of Western Carolina Rescue Ministries said, "You need to work for me and be a director of development." I said, "I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. And I've never had a desk job."
Right.
So we took the summer. I said, "Just pay me minimum wage. We'll see if we like each other." And the rest is history. I fell in love with all things development and philanthropy.
How long were you with Rescue Missions
About
Ministries?
4 years. I
Okay,
stayed about 4 years.
and great organization too. But that's quite a shift, is right, from being a teacher and a musical performer to going into development. How did you pick that up, or did you go for school for that as well?
No. So I actually just took a lot of webinars, found a lot of friends that were fantastic mentors in the area, joined Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP as we call it, and just kind of did as much ingesting of information as I could and soaking up information. And then, I mean, for me, philanthropy is a lot about being kind, listening, and finding the right avenue for people to utilize their resources to help others.
By the way, if anybody's listening, you gave out a great piece of advice, I think, in the idea of a very gutsy move on your part, where you came on board, not on salary, not a full-time job, you just came up with to try it out.
Yeah, so minimum wage. So I was a teacher. And so I just told the executive director, I said, just let me work the summer. I'm not going to make money anyway as an educator. And I didn't want to hurt his budget in any way. So I did. So I jumped right in feet first and absolutely loved it.
And so after that summer, then you got hired on a full-time basis.
Yeah. So August, I signed a full-time contract with the mission, as we call it, Western Carolina Rescue Ministries, and stayed there for the next 4 years and just focused on growing their reach as far as brand awareness and dollars coming in the door.
That must have been quite a challenge then to have gone from a teaching gig, which is pretty guaranteed or pretty steady, not a lot of money, to going into a nonprofit. I mean, they're both nonprofits, but to have to then rely strictly on then raising money. So that's in large part what you do.
That's exactly what I do. And I will say, coming from the world of education where you're on a little bit of a shoestring budget, that
Right.
actually helped me a lot coming into the nonprofit world. And so understanding the value behind those dollars and how every penny, nickel, quarter, dollar makes such a huge difference in nonprofit land.
And talking about nonprofit land, for the benefit of the folks who don't know what the Verner Center for Early Learning is, what is it?
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit. It was started by a wonderful lady named Danny Verner. She actually did a leadership Swananoa class, and this was her project. Now, I think my CEO, Marsha Whitney, did a leadership Asheville
Yeah,
class with you, Blaine.
right. That's how I knew her. That was a
Yeah.
bunch of years ago. But this, so she wasn't the one who started it. It was started before Marsha came on board.
Correct. Yeah. So Danny Verner, she's actually passed now. She took a leadership Swananoa class, much like the leadership Asheville class. And this was her project that she envisioned. And then she gathered a good many of her friends, partnered with Warren Wilson College, and the Verner Center for Early Learning was born. So it primarily serves those children ages 0 to 5 who are living their hardest lives with the least amount of resources. But we pride ourselves on not only serving the child, which is a lot of our day-to-day operations if you popped in the building, but also the family. So giving them as many wraparound services as we possibly can to make them be successful and lessen the burden of everyday life.
When was the Verner Center formed then?
Yeah, it's been there for just over 20 years. I
Oh,
think we've
okay.
just rounded. Yeah.
Because by the way, you mentioned it too, recommendation, if Marsha hasn't made it to you, that somewhere along the line, you might want to check out Leadership Asheville. It's just just for a great way to meet people and make a lot of contacts for what you do. And I guess that's in large part what you're involved in, just making contacts and spreading the word about the center.
Yeah, and that's the best part of one of the best parts of my job. So I also did Leadership Asheville, and
Oh,
it's
you
a
did?
fantastic program. Yeah,
Okay, great.
it's a great way to connect with others, learn about our city, learn about our history, our government, our arts, our education, so many facets of our city and what's valuable.
And I guess from your standpoint, it's also helpful to you too, because you're meeting lots of people. It's amazing. I'm still in touch with some of my graduates of the class too, and you probably still are with some of the people that you went through it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's turned into great relationships, not only from the business level, but getting those businesses to understand which organizations are out there that they want to invest in. So it's a great networking tool. But I love to just get to know everybody in our town anyway. I jokingly say we think we're a big city, but we're quite small. And so I love when I run in a coffee shop and see familiar faces and can chat with people and catch up.
And to talk back again about the center. So this is for people geographically, where do you get the students from?
Yeah, so we have two campuses. We have one on East Asheville up in Swananoa, and it's actually on Warren Wilson College land. So they lease the land to us for $1 a year. And again, we're serving some of our families that are living some pretty hard, significant lives. They've been through some form, most of them, about 75% of them have experienced some sort of trauma. So that could be any and all things, including incarcerated parents, maybe substance use or exposure while the child was in utero, or after the child has been born, domestic violence, maybe unsecure housing, things like that. So Verner East is there. We also do the same exact thing in a place where we call Verner Central. It opened in April of 22, and it's in the Emma community on Louisiana Avenue. And we're excited about that because we're able to reach and find some of our Latino, Latinx, and Latina communities and reach out to them and let them know this resource is available.
How does somebody get their child into the program?
Absolutely. So the person you want to connect with is Kim Akbar. She is what we call our URSA coordinator. And please don't ask me to tell you what that acronym stands for. It's a lot of letters with a lot of words attached. But basically, she gets to sit down with the families, and they do a pretty intimate intake process. So they're going to work through some of those difficult things to talk about, such as incarceration, unsecure housing, those sorts of things. And what they do is they rank the family. They give them a point system, if you will. And so the highest points get placed first at Verner. So that way we're making sure these kiddos are getting that attention and that treatment. And also that will give the parents the opportunity to perhaps get a job or get their GED or become more fluent in English. Whatever that process looks like, we're there to help them with that.
About how many children are involved at both campuses?
Yeah, so we're almost at 300 once we encompass all of our places and programs. There's a lot of different programs, but almost just under the 300 mark.
And unfortunately, the problem, I guess, is that you could take a lot more children if there's space. Is that correct? Or do you have a waiting list to get into it?
Oh boy, do we have a waiting list. Just like every place in Western North Carolina, Buncombe County is identified as a child care desert. So there's
Oh,
not enough childcare for all the children we have out there. So currently our waiting list is over 800. Now, I know
wow.
it's substantial. Now, a lot of those families are tuition-based families.
Right.
So families that could pay the amount. And we do have a very small percentage of those individuals in our school, but the vast majority of our kiddos and our families are in that 75% mark, which means they're living at or below the poverty line.
And so folks who support the center, they're helping out, if we will, society. I mean, other ways, where would these kids talk about where these kids would go if they didn't have the center?
I'm not sure. My guess is they would probably stay home with mom or dad, which of course creates an additional burden and barrier for that family because without those parents being able to get out and do what they need to do, whether that's a job or a GED or something like that, it kind of limits them. And of course, stress and anxiety and little ones running around is not always a good recipe. It can get quite stressful. So we want to take that burden off the families. We've even had families that have come to us and say, my car broke down and it's going to be 2 months before I can get the funding to fix the car. So my child's not able to attend school. And we actually work with those families and find them either the resources to fix the car or get them the gas card or whatever they need to ensure that child is coming to school because we want to lessen that burden and help that family be as successful as possible.
Talk about the experience for the child then. So if they get accepted, I mean, I just can't believe those numbers you mentioned, 800 waiting list. I mean,
Yeah.
so they get accepted. What does that mean? Is it half day, full day? Is it how many months of the year?
Yeah, so it's all 12 months of the year.
Wow.
The hours are actually a little different for each campus. So Verner East, coming up on this next school year, will be 8 to 5. Verner Central is primarily what we would call early Head Start, and we can dig into some of that later if you would like. But basically, their hours are 8:30 to 2:30. And so when they're with us, they are getting the utmost. It is premier care. We are dealing with social emotional behaviors and how to respond accordingly. We are giving them what we call a rainbow in my tummy. It's a nutrition curriculum that we've designed and created and implemented, in which they see colors of the rainbow on their plate. There's very little processed, all very much organic, nutritious food. And so they're getting breakfast, lunch, and snack with us when they're on campus. And then there's a whole bunch of what we call outdoor learning environments. So playing outside, exploring the world around them, water play, mud play, imaginative play. I mean, you name it, we do it. And it is so much fun to see those children light up when they're at school.
Especially, I would imagine at Warren Wilson's the ideal place to be there. And so do you have, in terms of not only your faculty, but do Warren Wilson students get involved or are they in part of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I believe we have just set up a residency program. So the early education program at Warren Wilson College and Verner Center for Early Learning have a very close relationship. So a lot of times their students will come over and do internships, and see what we're doing in the classroom so they can learn and take it forward and implement it.
I imagine, I don't know if you do this, but there's an opportunity there for you for music enrichment programs, or do you get involved at all in any of the programs?
Oh gosh, because of my music background, you
Right.
mean? Not quite yet. So I'm just under the 6-month mark there at Verner Center for Early Learning. So I haven't had that opportunity yet. However, I have been able to take a couple webinars to learn more about music and this particular young age group. So I'm hopeful that as I get my feet a little more under me at Verner, that I can pop in the classroom and do some music therapy and interpretive dance and all the fun things that we get to do when we're in the classroom.
That'd be cool. Or you could always do that in your philanthropy approaches. You could sing, when you make a presentation to ask people for money or something to support. Talk about that also, if you would, Jessica, in terms of support you get from the community, and talk about where you get it from also.
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about that. So we do receive a decent amount of federal, state, county funding. It's been a little scary. I'm not sure if you've been following this, but with all the ARPA and stabilization funding ending in December, we're actually facing some pretty significant budget decisions coming up. Our fiscal year runs from September to August. We're on a little bit of a different fiscal year. So that's been quite painful of a process to walk through. But we also receive support from individuals and businesses. In fact, we just had Home Trust invest in a community library. So families can come, they get a Home Trust drawstring bag, and we were able to purchase brand new books that align with our mission, vision, and values. And so the children can take them home. And some of them even have accompanying materials, such as the little stuffed animals that go with the Very Hungry Caterpillar, or we even have these things called Tony's boxes. They play audio books, and so you put a little emoji or an icon on the top of the Tony's box, and it plays the story that goes with that particular icon. So big shout out to Home Trust Bank for their support.
What's cool listening to you is that you seem to really enjoy this process too, in terms of, I guess, seeing who you're serving and get to see how it works. And it does work. It's just the sad thing is, you said, a lot of these children would have no place, they'd be getting nothing for all this period of time.
Yeah, we just know that the first 2,000 days of life are the most crucial. This is when the vocabulary is starting, the pre-math skills, the pre-literacy skills. We know that people that have these first 2,000 days of life that have experienced early care, they are less likely to be incarcerated. They're more likely to have a higher income. Stats like this, it shows, I've heard as much as a $7 to 7-to-1 investment, and all the way up to 18-to-1 investment. So early care and early education is crucial for our children out there. So we want to make sure that especially our children with additional barriers are able to have just as successful of an outcome as any other child in the world.
And so overall, one of the cool things I think about Verner is what you based on, or kind of the philosophy of Verner. And if I can ask you to talk just a little bit about that as well. I think you told me off the air where there are 4 cornerstones, you call it, of Verner.
Yeah. Yep. There's 4 cornerstones, and a lot of it is centered around play. So you won't find, if you walk into Verner at any given day in a classroom, you are not going to find us sitting down and, dictating to the children. We don't do a lot of cutesy arts and crafts where we're making, things to send home. It's more about the experience and the discovery of. So, for example, my daughter is in a classroom now, and she comes home and we're running in the yard, and she goes, mariposa, mariposa. And I'm like, what is this? That is the word for butterfly in Spanish. So they're learning through play. Much of their art to you and I may look, we'll call it abstract, if you will. But we know that before children can make small little motions with their hands with paintbrushes, they've got to do the big motions first. So the artwork is quite big. Imaginative play. We do a lot with imaginative play. We want them to go to different worlds and imagine and discover. And our libraries are special designed for each classroom. So if we have Spanish speaking families, that will be in there, Spanish books, and anything to walk them through. If someone's getting a divorce, those books will be in there as well.
So how cool is that? You get to go, or your daughter gets to go to school with you, or vice versa?
Kind of. We actually don't see each other very much, but we're sometimes in the same building at the same time.
Oh, that's great though, isn't it? I mean, for you, must
yeah,
be.
and she has just changed dramatically since being at Verner. The way that she's open to eating and trying new foods, the way that she's excited to make a mess and get in into stuff, whether it's mud or water or sand or slime. And the way that she's more open-minded about the world and what she sees and the way she takes it in, it's been, you know, drastically changed our family. And so I can only imagine what it does for others.
What's the ratio of teachers to students?
Yeah, so the vast majority of our classrooms and all of our classroom next year will be 8-to-1. So there's always a lead teacher in each classroom and then an assistant teacher. So there's two leaders, if you will, in each classroom, and then often there's a third that's a floater. So it's a pretty heavily supported classroom. It's always fun if I get to pop in, but that doesn't happen very often.
Now, are you having difficulty staffing the classrooms?
Yeah, staffing is tough. So unfortunately, we are with the ARPA funding and the stabilization grants, we were able to increase those those salaries, excuse me, for those teachers. It's still not enough. They're still not being compensated at the level that they should be. They're still not being compensated as equal partners to the K through 12 teachers. So that's tough. And it makes it hard to keep our teachers. And we know that since COVID, we are seeing where we used to see in a classroom of 1 to 2 children with these different developmental things, we're now seeing 6 to 7 of our children that need additional resources, whether it's some sort of therapy or support inside and outside the classroom. So it's a tough job and it's hard, but it's a rewarding job at the same time.
You know, you mentioned that it's always something that bugged me also, is that perhaps one of the most important things we can have is raising children. And I always thought the two most incongruous facts are the people who get paid the least are the people who raise young folks, and people who take care of old folks. You know, what's wrong with that picture? You know, that you think it'd be reversed. You know, that's where all the money should go to young children, but also above. And it's just not enough resources. I don't get it, you know, because it's so important a job. How does somebody in terms of teachers you hire, are they do they have degrees in early education or not necessarily, or they all do?
Yeah, some of them do. So we actually have kind of a sliding scale, if you will, depending on what they come in with skill sets. All lead teachers are required to take this course we call EDU 119. So they all have to have that early education course. Some of them do have early education degrees. And then, of course, if they have additional skill sets, like they are bilingual or they've been in the classroom for X amount of years or they taught in an elementary level, all that comes into play. So not every single person's on the same pay rate, but regardless, it's still not enough.
What percentage of the faculty is bilingual?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know. I know we have both on both campuses. We have representatives that are bilingual and they are there. We have more at our Emma community campus, so the Verner Central, just because we are embedded in that Emma community that we know has, you know, more of a Spanish speaking population as their native language.
I would imagine also you probably have other languages out there too, aside from Spanish speaking, and becoming even, I guess, more complex for hiring folks that, you know, they speak more than just Spanish and English. There are other languages floating around.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know we have some Arabic, some German, some Hindi. I think there's six of them. I can't recall them all. But like I was talking about those classroom libraries, so that's when we really can embark on that and enjoy that, talking about our different cultures and heritages. Though that we'll have books in every single classroom that will have their native language in their library. So we can talk about that and we can explore their language with them. And sometimes we've had even our families bring in food from their culture or costumes or clothing or musical instruments, because we want everyone to know they're welcome and they're loved and appreciated for who they are and valued and seen and heard.
You also work with volunteers?
Yes, we do. So that has been something that's been an interesting journey throughout COVID, right? So pre-COVID in nonprofit land, volunteers aplenty. COVID happens, we all, you know, very much pulled back in. And now we're starting to think about or at least we, some of us are starting to think about journeying out a little more than we have been. So there are plenty of volunteer opportunities, and that's everything from working in our garden. So our children visit our Verner garden every single week, where they learn about where their food comes from. Sometimes they harvest food, all the way to organizing our libraries, to mending books, to cutting out laminations, to holding babies and playing with preschoolers. So you can do any of those items. And Stephanie Kelly would be your contact person at Verner for that.
I guess in general, the best bet to get information about such opportunities or these names you mentioned would be go to your website.
Absolutely.
And what's the website?
Yeah, it is vernerearlylearning.org. And I'm going to spell Verner because
Please.
that's not a very common thing. So it is V as in victory, ERN as in Nancy, ER, vernerearlylearning.org.
And so folks go there, they can find out a couple of things. One, they can find out, as you said, if they're interested in volunteering or want to help, but they could also find out about the whole process about getting in or enrolling to get your child in.
Absolutely. Just call us. Our number is on Google or on our website or anywhere, and we'll be happy to direct you to the best option for you, get you in conversation with those particular staff members that can help guide you through that processing and hopefully get you in.
That must be tough for the staff members and for you as well, is to meet folks and then have to tell them they can't get in, or just they don't tell them per se, but they get a letter or something. It must be a very tough process to go through.
It is. Now we do have another option. It's called our home-based program. So sometimes families will do this if they either are, they want to stay in the home or they're on the waiting list. And it's where we send in-home educators into the home and spend time with them. They also do socials once a month where the in-home educators and the families can come into the building and learn and grow and experience with each other. So it's kind of a little bit of a compromise. It works for some families, prefer that. And then for other families that are on the waiting list, it's better than nothing. So it's also a great program to think about.
And so at the age of 5, then they've gone through the center. And by the way, some students go through the center for 5 years, or not 5 years, but since they were infants. What's the youngest? So what's the youngest you take them?
They can start as young as 6 weeks old.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So do you have some students who have been there for all the period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. We even have a child who was with us the entire time. We do a program called Bears, 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 and it's meant to be a transition object. So everybody at Verner gets a bear with a t-shirt with their picture and name on it. And we know that our kiddos at this age can't remember necessarily capture that image of mom or dad in their head. So that's why you see a lot of children with these loveys. We all give them a bear. And one child actually left Verner and took her bear with her the first day of school of kindergarten. Again, just feeling a little uncomfortable, not certain about what's going to happen. And that transition object was a source of security. So yeah, everything Verner does is very intentional and makes a lasting impact on these children.
Just curious, has any student ever come back to Verner, like started 20 years ago or 18 years ago, then come back as a teacher, or you track them at all? Have some come back?
Yes, I don't know if we have any that are teachers currently. I think that has happened in the past. And I'm actually working to dig in on that data to see how many of them are still in our area to see if they'll come back. I know a year or so ago, they did a 20th anniversary party, and they did just that. They invited people that were alum, if you will, of Verner to come back and share where they were and what they were up to. And it's very impactful and moving to see that they're with us still and they're in touch with us. So yeah, it's a wonderful program.
You describing it sounds that it would be it would be a great thing to see, and you'll see next time they have it. Let me ask you one other thing we didn't get to talk about, but I know you also have something called is the Center for Resilience. What's that all about?
Yeah, brand new, super exciting. So through a Dogwood Health Trust grant, we were able to create what's called a Center for Resilience. And as you and I spoke tonight, it's hard because all these teachers are dealing with, you know, lots of kids that have lots of issues, and it's not an easy job. And so sometimes, often, our teachers also need mental health support, self-care practices, things like that. So the Center for Resilience is actually designed with our educators in mind. And so what it's going to do is make our educators a priority and give them a space where they can come for free on campus and receive mental health support and learn self-care practices. So we have coming up, we're going to have an opening ceremony in August, and then we anticipate to start having teacher support groups in October. The grant is for 4 years, so we can't wait to see where that goes. And we are going to share these practices not only within the Verner community, but with other early care and education facilities in our community.
It's what a cool concept, because as you said, that teachers don't have resources oftentimes or to fall back on if they have difficulty. So that's really going to be kind of exciting. And I guess there aren't too many of those centers around the country even, you know.
No, I think we're one of the first, if that. I think we kind of just dreamt it up and wanted to let the educators know that we see them and we hear them, and we know it's not always easy, but they're valued and they're loved, and their health matters to us just as much as our families and kiddos.
Great. To recap, if folks want to learn more about the center, the Verner Center for Childhood Learning, either to have the children become enrolled in it and or to volunteer or find out more, best bet is to do what?
Yeah, contact us at vernerearlylearning.org. Give us a call at local 298-0808. You can ask for me, Jessica May. I'm happy to guide you and direct you in whatever avenue we need to explore together.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you, Jessica May, for being my guest on the BLAINESWORLD podcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. Hopefully we'll bump into each other one of these times.
Yes, sir. It'd be my pleasure.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.